So this just popped up on my Twitter feed, and I think this is a pretty funny one, so I thought we'd go over it on stream. And this is from a Labour MP, no less. This is a Labour MP who's saying that we need to confiscate properties from rogue landlords. Now, depends how you define rogue landlords, because I would define rogue landlords as all landlords. But I will take this as a reasonable compromise. The fact that this proud nation that protects property rights may indeed have people in government, precious few, but at least a number that is non-zero, of those who believe that you lose your right to your property rights over something as important as housing in form of social utility, right? That there is some societal utility in ensuring that either private landlords provide homes fit for human habitation, or they have their privilege of being a landlord taken away and the house gets given to the council. And that's the plan that he is recommending from the Housing Select Committee. So let's have a read of what his potential proposals might be. Rental homes should be confiscated from private landlords who repeatedly break the rules and exploit tenants, the head of the Commons Housing Committee has told The Guardian. Clive Betts, the chair of Levelling Up Housing and Community Select Committee, said handing courts the power would create a significant deterrent for landlords who treated fines for letting out squalid, unsafe and overcrowded homes as simply a cost of doing business. Confiscated homes could become the property of councils, which could then use them to house people in need or sell them off to raise money for social housing, the Labour MP said. But why would you sell off the house to create social housing rather than just own the house? It'd be cheaper to do it that way. But even so, this would be increasing the stock of social housing, decreasing the power of private landlords, acting as a deterrent to force ones who are close to skirting the rules into actually following the rules if they do have the threat of having their house taken away, should they not act like responsible landlords. So yeah, Mr. Betts, I agree with this incredibly Maoist plan of you to confiscate private sector housing and turn it into council housing, like we should have been doing years ago to these rogue landlords, or indeed to the empty houses that are everywhere, should be taken over by councils and renovated into council housing as well. There are plenty of things that we could be doing, A, to attack the private landlord market, and B, to increasing our supply of socially rented homes and council housing. The threat of seizure would bring up landlords fairly sharply, because some of those properties are worth quite a lot of money, he added. The committee previously proposed a version of the idea in 2018, but it was rejected by Theresa May's government, but she's a good Tory chat, right? She's one of the good ones, even though she's very happy to protect landlords from providing homes that aren't fit for human habitation. Love it. Great. In its Living Hell series, The Guardian is shining a light on its issues in the private rented sector, including the case of Mohammed Ali Abbas Rasool, a rogue landlord in London who caused misery for tenants for more than 10 years despite repeated fines, prohibition notices and bans. And that's exactly the same kind of thing that you get looking at the water industry. This is my example of failure of our institutions across all of this country, right? It's a real good microcosm is the water sector. To make that comparison, they know that fines are the cost of doing business. They know that the government is always going to be soft-handed on them when they do indeed violate things such as providing things with a level to be fit for human habitation or not. So what that means is that as long as it is financially viable for them to absolve the fines while still charging the tenants through the nose that live there, they will continue to do that, or indeed charging the people who use the water through the nose, because both landlords and the private water sector both understand they have a captive market of people who can't say no. So standards go down and competition is non-existent outside of the monopoly that both the water sector, or the monopoly rather, that the water sector and the housing sector have on each of these markets. So they both can treat fines with no care in the world. They can always afford to pay the fines. It's cheaper for them to pay fines than it is for them to provide homes fit for human habitation. One housing official involved in investigating Rasool's case thinks he and other landlords built the expectation of fines into their business model and take the hit, just like the water companies. In an interview at the State of Private Renting in England, Betts also said it was probable that the delayed ban on no-fault evictions would not come into effect until after the next general election. It was first promised in spring 2019. An actual manifesto promise, Suella, right? Unlike all the manifesto promises that you invented in your resignation letter, or in your firing letter, your sacking letter, right? There are actual manifesto promises for renters reform and to a ban on no-fault evictions. Yet I don't see you caring about the government reneging on its promise to ban them. Weird, isn't it? Squalor in private rented housing has been made worse and was underestimated because tenants were simply too frightened to report disrepair. Yeah, because of Section 21 evictions, because of no-fault evictions, they can literally kick people out for no reason if they start complaining about the disrepair, right? If they start complaining about the conditions of the housing, they run the risk of being kicked out onto the street because of Section 21. these problems are cyclical. Labour's policy to boost social house building by negotiating harder to get private developers to build more would not solve the housing crisis. I can't believe he's been calling out the Labour Party internally. I've been saying this for months. I did a whole video on why the Labour's house building plans will fail, because it's just fingers crossed, deregulate, hope the private sector does it. We'll just negotiate rather than actually building any ourselves, because they've already said there's no new state money for new council housing. Rachel Reeves ruled that out on Sunday with Laura Koensberg, right? When they could have explicitly said this was in the fiscal rules. Fiscal expansion is within the fiscal rules if it's on infrastructure, if it's on investment, which new social housing almost certainly would fall within that remit, yet they still won't promise money for it. And they have to build it themselves because they cannot guarantee that private developers will build those. It's as simple as that. And Clive Betts is absolutely correct to call out Lisa Nandy and now Angela Rayner and Rachel Reeves for their failure on house building policy and their failure on fiscal policy. His cross-party committee recently clashed with ministers over the handling of the ban on no-fault evictions, which the Housing Secretary Michael Gove delayed indefinitely this month, citing the need to first reform the courts to allow landlords to evict tenants for reasons including antisocial behaviour more quickly. Because of course, what's more important is giving landlords more powers to evict people than it is to take them away. And we can't inconvenience landlords at all by taking away something without giving them something in return. Betts said that the committee was very angry, rightly so, that the government cited its concern about court capacity, which it first raised 4 years earlier when explaining the delay. And of course, the courts are underfunded because the government has engaged in austerity for 13 years, literally. No-fault evictions allowed landlords to eject tenants without giving a reason. A ban was part of the manifesto, but backbenchers have blocked it. Betts said that because of the delay, no one who rented privately or under the current tenancy arrangements could have any certainty about where they would be living in a year's time. The delay, he added, had meant an awful situation for the family, thinking about not only where their home would be, but about where your children's school will be and how about you get to work. Because the fundamental principle of stability is having a stable house that you're always going to have access to. And that's what council housing does. It gives you stability. It makes it cheap. It makes it widely available. It stops the private sector from being able to charge people through the nose. The best way of ensuring stability for families in communities is through council housing, right? You can have owner-occupiers. I am one myself, right? But that doesn't mean that I think that that's the right fit for everybody. And even then, it doesn't necessarily provide stability for everybody when, as we've seen, overnight, if the government doesn't control the economy correctly, the prices of people's mortgages can massively increase to the point at which the houses become unaffordable, and suddenly all that stability that you would have in a council house completely goes away, right? So this failure on social housing and destroyed our communities, right? The housing crisis is the biggest problem outside of probably the climate crisis. I'm sure my chat is sick of me continuing going on about it, but it's true. It literally is like a gigantic problem that cannot be solved with making tiny little changes around the edges by slight alterations to current policy. It needs a war effort on building brand new social housing, right? I don't care if it's blocks of flats. I don't care if it's mid-rises. It just needs to be lots of it cheaply now. And that no other solution will work because this is 100% a supply issue and a privatisation issue. The two things are in tandem. Betts said tougher action was needed to deter landlords from mistreating tenants. They're putting tenants in appalling accommodation. They're using the threat of eviction to make sure they don't get complaints, and they are oblivious to the fines that are levied against them, he said. All that needs to change, and needs to change quickly, not waiting for some court reforms 5 or 6 years' time. True. National Residential Landlords Association, that esteemed group, who should never actually be mowed in Minecraft, opposed the idea of new penalties. It said councils could already take over properties owned by repeat offenders and seize assets from criminal operators. Unfortunately, neither set of powers is fully and routinely utilised. This will go a long way towards deterring rogue and criminal landlords. Betts was also critical of Labour's housing policy, which he said would fail to build the social housing needed to resolve the problems of the private rented sector. Angela Rayner, the Housing Secretary, told Party Conference last month that a Labour government would require private developers to build more affordable housing as a price of a planning consent. But the Cross-Party Housing Committee has estimated that 90,000 new social homes needed to be built in each year, and relying on developer contributions would not deliver that. See, even the Conservative members of the Cross-Party Select Committee around housing thinks that Labour aren't doing enough on social housing. When Tory members of select committees are calling out Labour for being too right-wing, you know you're done for, right? Instead, a multi-billion-pound increase in state subsidies for social housing was needed, Bet said. Very true. As one witness said simply to us, you can't have subsidised housing without subsidies. That's going to be a challenge for any new government. Labour said if it wins the general election, it will ensure all existing funding available for affordable housing is spent, and it will assess the inherited situation to create a robust plan. But of course, there will be no additional money from the state for new council housing because it's been ruled out by Rachel Reeves, even though it's within the fiscal rules. But yeah, I am pretty happy with what Clive Betts is saying there, 100%. We have one very rare-based Labour MP who wants to go full Mao on these landlords, and I couldn't agree more. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video.